Good morning to everybody. Welcome to this part of this program, of this section. I hope you're going to have an interesting morning. I want to thank, first of all the organizer of this event. It's been a pleasure and honor for me to be part, in particular, the Global Institute for Church Management, Fitzgerald Institute for Real Estate, the Program for Church Management, all the key responsible. Special thanks to Father Bob Gall for giving me the trust and involving in this. I've been also involved in different capacities as a lawyer with His Eminence Carl Pell since 2007, when he was the Archbishop of Sydney. So thank you again to everyone. A special thanks also to Pia De Solenni for all the work that she did to put this conference together in a difficult moment after COVID. It's not easy to organize, to have people moving around the world, with also all the crisis ongoing. So a special thanks to Pia for the excellent work. I'm Carlo Dalla Vedova. I'm a lawyer in Rome. I've been working in different capacity with the church. I work also international with the international organization. This is actually my previous life. It's my specialty. I work for UN agency. So when we get into protocol, international affairs, it's also a good inspiration for the church. I would say that I will have a practical approach in this presentation. So I will mention some example, some experience to give advice. I'm not here to discuss or try to solve some of the problems. This is not the forum. I will also to give any clarification required. I was asked to speak about unutilized property, which it was one of the problems that we are facing today in terms of use, property that are empty. That's the main problem in Italy, in Europe in general. So what to do, how to handle, the legal implication for those who have the responsibility of being the manager, and the solutions, if possible, based on experience, consideration about some facts that have considered to be mistakes that have been made in the last years. And so this is the overview all of my presentation. But to get to the point, I think I need to give some preliminary remarks. First of all, the church, we should never forget that is a religious entity with a very long history, but it's also a state. It's a state. The Holy See is officially part of the international community, is part of the United Nations, has diplomatic relations with many countries around the world. And as a state, with a territory, with a population, with rules of law, with tribunals. We heard yesterday Cardinal Pell making reference to the case of the financial scandal and possible fraud in London. There's a court organization, there's a population, so we are officially a state. And the point I want to get is that I'm talking to an international audience today, so let's not forget this, because we have our internal rule, which is canon law, was mentioned before by Father Miguel, that help us because it's applicable worldwide. By definition, the church is not national, is not international, is not global, it's universal. And we have our internal rules that they do have. Code of law is a combination. This is one of the reasons why I have to be a lawyer, going to America, come back and work. I have a family tradition of lawyers. I decided to go and also graduate in canon law at the Pontifical University. Is that as the principle of law, which they're common, they're codified. So it's like Italy, France, Germany, but there's also the spirituality in, which helps, because we should never forget that the principle of law and the norm and regulation are important to know how to behave and how to handle, but they're more important how to settle, how to close a dispute. Because going to court and litigate and oppose a wall against a wall is not often the solution. And the code of canon law, it's full of these elements that help people, lawyers in first, and magistrate, and in general people, administrator, to support in finding a way out when there is a problem. Not only to know the rules, what we have to do, but also helps for, as I said, a settlement of dispute. I also want to say I'm a Roman, lived here. I feel like being in the arena of the Colosseo here today, in this beautiful building. Notre Dame has this beautiful facility in Rome, all the way from United States. The Colosseum, it's after this building. You can see it, it's a few meters away. And it's actually an inspiration to start from the Colosseo. The Colosseo is a well-known building. I don't need to elaborate. Has been there for a long time, like the church, actually before the church. Ante Christus, Colosseum, has been used, has been transformed, has been changed. The destination, the building, the maintenance problem, the preservation. And today what it is, it's a beauty. Thanks to those who have kept it for us. That's why I'm saying inspiration. As the church has been 2,000 years active. And we have a global, somebody said yesterday that is the biggest owner of property in the world. I don't know. It doesn't really matter, but the principle is there. So we have a responsibility today in our different capacity to consider, to protect, and to leave for the future. The same. The Colosseum today is a great source of income because the content of our seminar today is also how to use it, how to get the revenue. We heard the administration in the Philippines. We have many other that can give us example, because managing property means also expenditure. We need to organize to get a revenue. We're not speculating. We're not a commercial activity, but we need money. We need funds. And I thought always inspiring on this principle, His Excellency Cardinal Pell, who has been an innovator. He from Sydney came to Rome and held a very important position. And he tried to bring this into the church as an idea. I would say something, but we are bound to find financial support, financial resource. Of course, not to make a profit or to make a distribution, but to support the real estate, support our activity, and continue the good work that we've been doing. So I will say a few words about what is the definition. I want to thank also Valentina and Angelica that have prepared the slides for me. They're far too long, so I will accuse myself if I go a little bit fast, because there's a little bit, there's too many issues. But we have to start, of course, what is real estate and how is defined in the canon law principle, the use of the real estate for religious and cult. In Italy, there's a very clear definition given by the Supreme Court, which defines the commercial and religious and cult. We need to keep the majority of the activity of the entity, no matter which is a parish, a congregation, male or female, the diocese, the archdiocese, has to be the majority, always religious and cult. Also to get the benefit arising from the tax exemption, tax benefit. And also not to lose the status of ecclesiastic entity. Once there is a legal personality according to the church recognized by the pontifical congregation or at the diocese, at the level of the diocese, where you have the ordinary of the site that has jurisdiction, it becomes an entity of the church, which is universal. This is the beauty of this. So it's recognized all over the world. Of course, it lives and is act in that jurisdiction. Therefore, we need to know the local law, because working in Italy is different than working in California or in the Philippines. So we need to have the domestic jurisdiction in relation to canon law. We have concordates, bilateral agreements signed by the Holy See that also helps where it do, and they do exist. There's something like 15, 16. Some of them are bilateral agreements, some other they're different. A piece of legislation, domestic, that they do give the church as well as other religious entity, a religious cult, because the Catholic Church is one of the oldest, together with Islam, with Buddhism, with Hinduism, with Protestant, with Methodists. There's so many other religions. So it's not only that we have this possibility. And the other principle that we need to, so the religion and worship, the canon law for what concerns the application of the limits, the possibility of to have a concordate, and the point of being a legal representative. I'm the legal representative. I've been appointed by my bishop to supervise the congregation. The congregation has a society international and then has 10 provinces. One is the Italian province. In the Italian province, there's 15 property, schools, convents, sanctuary. It's a big responsibility. I'm the legal representative of all this. I'm a priest, I'm a nunce. I do other things. What I'm going to do, the opening of the lay is an instruction that has been given by the Holy Father, and it's implementing. Cardinal Pell also was referring to his experience where he was in the Holy See, to bring in people that can know the subject. We can't think that a priest or nuns are able to manage funds, to invest funds, to deal with the employment issue, which is one of the biggest problems that we have. Our staff of the schools, of the hospitals, so it's important to know this. And the legal representative, what it means, how to be appointed, and the power that also is defined, has to be clearly defined in terms of be able to work and decide on real estate. So it's all this. I want to say that I will use three words that I think is important for the scope of this seminar. One is harmonization. The second word is transparency. And the third word, which as a consequence, is trust. The harmonization today is a requirement. We as a church, we cannot still be away from protocols, guidelines, instruction that are fully applied worldwide by similar organizations in terms of auditing our accounts to be in line with protocols on conservation of document, on conservation of data, on behave. How many times the church had to defend from fair or unfair accusation of alleged crimes committed around the world, just because we were not in a position to have a file on that person or to have a specific review internal of the fact. So all this today is becoming a need, and therefore the harmonization is a requirement. It's pretty difficult to harmonize because the church is worldwide, so it's totally different from dealing with the property in Sudan. We were at the PCM last time and talking about registration of a church in Sudan, of my land and my maps, because they have built a new school. Do we have a title? Do we have a map? And the father was telling the story. It's very different from what perhaps we have here in Rome, in terms of be sure that I'm the owner, that I have a legal title, that there's no lien, there's no surprise, there's no litigation, there's no tax liability. And the maps, are we sure that what we own is fully registered? Oh, somebody forgot. We have a school in Naples, sister, very active, very successful, that in 1972, they sold part of the building that came with a donation. They used that money to build a new school with a big bridge connecting the old building and the new building in 1972, and it's today the school still existing. No one took the initiative to register the new school in the municipality official registry. The cadastro is called, the cadastral maps. And we found out this the other day because we're doing auditing. And this is one of the things we need to do. The real estate is defined by Article 1254, and already the title is an inspiration. The bonis ecclesia temporalibus. Temporalibus, again, going back to the Colosseum, we are enjoying the Colosseum temporalibus, temporarily today, thanks to what happened. And we are the same in the church. We are using the boni and of the ecclesia for the time that we are here. We can have it because the church is so old that many countries in the world, they just recognize the property by jure nativo, okay? Because we have been there for much before any other official nation, that we have our recognition of the title based on this, or because we bought it, or because we are holding, or because we are managing, and of course, we are also in the position to sell. These are the codes, just to give the information that they talk about what we have to do, the purposes. I don't want to go fast on this. The one part of this, the next slides. Yeah, it's the one I want to mention. We heard many experiences in these 2 days about how to support, how to look for finance. how it's easy to get the support. But I want to remind this canon, and I'm sorry, this is the one really I really want to read it, because it's often forgotten. The Christian faithful are obliged. I'm a lawyer, so oblige. It's a strong word. The Christian faithful are obliged to assist with the needs of the church, so that the church has what is necessary for divine worship, for the work of the apostolate and the charity, and of the decent support of ministry. This is obliged. And I want to link this to the idea of selling a property. Selling a property, which was often used in the last 10, 15 years, is today, at least here in Italy, at least also in the Vatican. And let's not forget that any sale over 1 million here in Italy, but in America also, you need to go to the congregation to get the authorization, which is a safeguard. Because the congregation today is not like before that they get the nil obstat, it's a certificate you can authorize. They want to see why you want to sell it. And the document that has to be supporting a sale has to be elaborated and has to be according to the standard of any banks, any venture capital, any insurance company that decides to sell a property. You need to have a valuation. You have to explain why. You have to explain that there's no other alternative to use that building. You need also what you're going to do with the funds. That's why things are changed. But before doing that, which sometimes I personally think that I'm anticipating also the conclusion, selling a property sometimes is a failure. It's a failure of our mission with regard especially to the goodwill that is behind that property that today perhaps is empty because there's no vocation. But 2,000 years ago, the church went up and down all the time. So we have to envisage that this might happen again. And closing a convent, especially if it's an historical building or it's a unique position, will means that you have canceled the goodwill, the mission, and also will never be able to restate the situation. So the idea of selling a property, even partially, which means, I have a big property with a parking lot and I sell the parking lot because they're going to build and make a, that is possible, but only if we really have a financial crisis. And luckily, religious entities, they don't work on bank guarantee, loans, mortgages, and so on. So we are not debt. We don't have debts in general, like perhaps in the commercial world, where you get to a point that we're almost bankrupt, we need to sell all the way. We're not at that position. So the idea of having an empty house, an empty convent, and just sell it because we can use the money to open X number of missions in Africa or Asia, Oceania, is correct, but only if it's really duly, adequately motivated with numbers of consideration before. Together with, I think, this is a little bit of a repetition. You see how many countries have this type of concordates. And going back, for example, to the excellent introduction of the Sant'Egidio. Okay, Sant'Egidio is an excellent example of an entity that has been successfully working in that field and is taking care of a burden of the state, like many other entities of the church, in terms of education, of hospital, of elderly assistance, handicap, and so on, where the state, in Italy for sure, but I'm sure all over the world, is not present, is not providing a social services. So therefore, Sant'Egidio, for example, is well recognized by the Italian authority and European authority. Let's not forget that today Italy is not only a nation and the Republic of Italy. We are within the European Union. You can also call it United States of Europe, like somebody does. So we're 27. We have a government in Brussels. We have funds in Brussels. We have social officers over there. And therefore, the interaction and the synergy from organizations like Sant'Egidio and public authority, because they were doing a service of the church, has to be always improved and has to continue. And Sant'Egidio is pretty good in doing this. Again, why they're doing this, how they can able to do this. Of course, with the example. The words can convince, but it's the example that will bring the support and the trust. There's no doubts. So we can talk, you can have all the seminar, but then if you don't do properly think outside, you will never be able to convince. The legal representative, just to make sure that everything's going. There always has to be appointed canon law first. So we need to have a decree with the official recognition of the legal representative, and then in the different jurisdiction, there's always a recognition. What I heard some time about people that they do have a responsibility is that they feel not in line, or they not feel safe in terms of sort of liability, responsibility. Today we heard there's also a new crime that has been introduced with the Code of Canon Law, which is actually the base of the case for London, which is financial fraud. It didn't exist. So a lot of priests and nuns, they come to me and say, why, how can I take a decision on this? And morally, I do other things. I never know about money. I don't know about firing a person, closing down a school, and putting on the street X number of teachers. How many times happened? We've been involved in the last 15 years, many, many times in closing schools in this country, which all the social issue related. Well, there is a solution, which is the solution applied in all other similar organizations, okay? The collegium decision. We're all human. We're all subject to mistake. Thinking that we don't make a mistake is already a mistake. We need to confront, if we don't feel comfortable with a problem and a possible solution, which again, let's assume simple, just to give an example, selling a property. I don't really want to sell this, but we need to sell because all these people say we have to cover the deficit, but maybe we can get the money from another province. Maybe we can go and get the money from other sources. Oh, by the way, there's a donor. They want to do a shed. They want to open a homeless. They want to help this. I don't want to do. So don't take the responsibility for those of you who are in this position to take a decision alone. Get advice when you don't know the field, because we are not culturally kept in a position to know everything. Okay, I'm not an architect. I would like to have architect today, Johnson, telling me many advice on many of the situations that I have. And again, bring it to the superior, bring it to the capitolo, bring it to your board, and have a final decision ratified by a collegium organization. Some of the problem is about legal title. Okay, are we sure we own the property? Well, we've been here for many years. These things happen also with rented apartments. Some of the property are rented. We need to make sure that everything is in order. This today, it's easy thanks to these things, to these things. We have everything on we don't need to have the archive in paper. And if we do that, scanner, make a virtual archive immediately. It can destroy. In many countries of the world, there's been war where, boom, they destroy all the official books, and we lost title. This happened in the Second World War, here in Italy also, with the Nazi and so on, countries that had been, property had been taken away. Pakistan, we were involved in a situation in Pakistan, and now the church has, they've been returned some of the property that were taken away many years ago. And it's all about title. Is yours? Are you sure? Can you prove it? Can we prove it? So one of the responsibilities to make sure, once I'm appointed, to have everything in order, to know that this building is mine, that has been the title and also the work. This has all been renewed. It's all in compliance with the new organization. I mean, with all the new requirement, the conformity, the regulation. The example of the church in Naples that came out, we discovered that the new building was not registered. It took us one architect, a mapping of the new, which today is done with the laser machine. So you get into a room, you do boom, 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 and this is immediately copied on a piece of paper. Then you file it virtually to the municipality of Naples. All this cost 500 euros. That was it. So we need to make sure that we comply with this norm. Together with this, we have the problems where we keep the archives, because that's a valuable information, has to be protected. The church, as you know, it has a vertical organization, and going back to the definition of who owns the property. This, under the supreme authority of the Roman Pontifex, ownership of goods belongs to that juridical person which has acquired them legitimate. This has been used and speculated many times in terms of so-called vicarious responsibility, to say that the church is a vertical organization So if a fact happened in Oceania by one of the juridical person that had perhaps a member that didn't behave properly, well, who's responsible? The Holy Father. Let's go to Rome and ask for compensation and claim. This is not the principle here. This is under the supreme authority of ownership, which means that, yes, in a way, we can say that Rome owns the property around the world, but it's only for a matter of supervision. There's a clear distinction of liability, responsibility of each juridical person around the world. So what happens in Oceania, in Australia, for example, is limited to Oceania and that jurisdiction, that province, that congregation. And of course, if the responsibility is personal because there's a criminal action, is the person responsible. So this is important. And that's why, based on this, under the Supreme, we need to get the authorization to dismiss real estate. Only that, but it's a management responsibility. And I'm not going to talk much about cash, financial value, but it's the same. How can we keep track of what we receive? We live on donation. All religious, all charity, all non-for-profit. We live on donation. We have to take this into consideration. The quest on Sunday morning is one of the simple examples. So we need to, and this is applicable also in other religions. The zakat for the Islam, the Mormon, they have a percentage of their income that goes to the entity. The Buddhists also, they ask for contribution. So it's something that it's our scope and donation. Again, transparent. I mentioned harmonization, transparency. We need to be able to show and to confront and to explain. If somebody say you received this money, what happened? Well, it's here, it's registered. We put it here. What is the use? Is this went into somebody's pocket? No, we use it for this expenditure. We actually use it to fix the church roof because it was necessary and so on. Of course, today is all banking. We have international standard. We will say something about, I think, on cashless policy. We're going towards a world where this machine, or perhaps a phone, or I don't know what, is going to make a payment. Even now, it's possible. You make a payment, you buy a coffee in Hong Kong. Here you can do it in America. Cashless. But of course, cash will never disappear. So for those of you who are actually dealing with cash, try to have a very simple protocol. And again, you can apply that in terms of having guidelines that you give to your members of your community to say, this is what you have to do with cash. But the world is going in a way that cash is going to disappear. Electronic money. European Brussels, they said 2013, we had to have electronic money implemented. We can't. And the reason is that it's full of fraud. It's not a safe system right now. In Asia, even more. It's so risky to have everything on a virtual and electronic money. The donation, we were talking about this, so I mentioned the modus. Okay, the modus is the condition, is the Latin word for the condition. So I give a donation, I die, I want to leave my property because I want to be used as a school. Forever? That's a big lien. It's always better not to have a lien, but of course we cannot disappoint the benefactor. We have to respect the will. Of course, all the people around the benefactor, normally they don't like that there is a donation. So it's important to make sure that the modus is possible, perhaps limit the modus, a school for 10 years. And today there's also, I was explaining also the indirect achievement of the modus, which means I have a school, I kept the school for 20 years in Rome. Now I can't, there's no kids anymore. There's a birth rate very low, and I don't want to envisage all the expenditure of employment. So I closed the school, but I opened a school, perhaps in the south or somewhere else in other place of my other provinces. And all this has to be done in advance with a feasibility study, with a resolution, all in writing, and then of course the financial transaction. I sell the property here, I invest in Africa, I open 5 schools in Uganda with the money coming from Rome, so that indirectly we are also respecting the will and intention of the benefactor. The archives, it's practical advice. Make everything online and keep it stored in 1, 2, 3, 4 places. There's a possibility probably in the future to have a central office with all the property. It was mentioned yesterday briefly by Cardinal Pell, but at least at continental level, we should be able, all the national conference around the world, they do have a database so that they know exactly how many juridical persons, what are the property, in order to be able, to storage the document and to have easy access. So any document today has to be simply copied, storage in a server, in a second backup, third backup, fourth backup, so that we can, they had sensible data. So we mentioned in several occasions, what is the relation with the media and what shall we do when we have sensible data? Also the accounts, are they public? Yesterday, the father from Norcia was mentioning that all the journalists was coming into the church to take video and to see what they were doing and so on. That's privacy. We need to be transparent, but we need to protect what we think is sensible. We don't need to publish our accounts. We are non-for-profit. There are different legislation around the world. So I apologize if I'm saying something not totally correct, because maybe in your country it's different. But here in Italy, ecclesiastic entity don't have any obligation, like a company or any other, to publish, to keep, to be registered with the court or registered with the Chamber of Commerce. But we need to have accounts. That doesn't mean that we can still very naively go ahead as we did in the past. We need to have accounts, because if something happens in terms of a prosecutor, an official investigation internally, from some superior organization of the Holy See that comes to see, we need to show. So we need to have the account. At the same time, the storage of our document has to be protected, and as I said, digital. The guidelines and protocol, it's very simple today to get access to other precedent in order to say we are going to implement the same. So let's do it. Let's implement a protocol on how we're going to keep it, how long we're going to keep the document. 10, 15 years. A receipt of a restaurant last night. Do I really need it to keep it? We're going into electronic invoicings also. That's another thing that is happening in Europe. So you don't need to have the physical paper anymore. But yes, the documents that you need to keep forever. The title of ownership has to be kept forever. The contract, receipt of payment, tax issue, legal title, 10, 15, 5 years. This is the normal standard time for statute of limitation, which means in order to eventually claim for a right or something. Tax compliance is 5 years. We're going into a totally online tax return system. So we don't, and hopefully there will be a one-page document that the government sends to me to say, we know, because we know, they know. Today, again, it's all here. Between this machine and this other machine, my data are totally available. So it's very easy for someone to control how many cars I have, how many houses, what my bank account, the secrecy of the banks has been abolished. The so-called blacklisted countries, tax favorable paradise, or whatever the definition, has totally disappeared. Everybody has signed agreement to disclose the information. The Vatican did the same. The Vatican as a state was accused not to be transparent, not to release the information. There was a big seizure of an amount done by the Italian government based on this suspect operation. We will say something about this. And so therefore, today it's easy to find, also referring to UN Protocol of Guidelines. I'm sorry if I'm making reference, but I think UN is a great organization because it's composed by state, it's 190, depends which agency, but almost all the countries in the world are part of the United Nations, and they do a lot of this work in terms of compliance. So they have protocol, inspiration, reference for everything, from intimate alleged abuse to use of privacy, documentation, conservation, gender, treatment, and so on. So it's really a good source of information. As I said, making a comparison, what is the difference between UN and the church? But actually, the church is universal, it's even bigger than UN. So legally speaking, from a practical point of view, we can get inspiration from this type of, of course, the planning today is extremely important. Any responsible person has to make short-term, long-term use of the real estate in this particular topic that we are considering today. There's also a quite, I would say, favorable situation of owning historical building. The church owns a beautiful building that, of course, will never be sold, but they're used for religious and cults sometimes. And very often today, there's talks about why don't we use it also for commercial? There's a lot of misunderstanding on this. Legally speaking, it's important that the juridical person has a majority of the activity related to the scope of the aims, according to the bylaws, according to canon law, according to the church, which is religion and cult, which is then defined. So it's a formation of the priest, helping the poor, and so on, vis-a-vis the commercial. But that does not mean that the entity cannot have a commercial, provided that doesn't become the majority of the activity. So we still need to have a very clear definition among my organization, even creating a vehicle like in Philippines of a company, to say the 100% of my activity, my financial, my budget, my real estate is composed by 80% is used for religion and cult activity, 20% is used for commercial. And again, when we go and stick into the commercial, you want to see what we do, these are the books. You want to see what is the revenue, this is the books. We pay tax. On the commercial side, you pay tax all over the world. And what you do with the revenue? Well, I'm using to support the institutional aims and scope. And this is the proof. All this line has to be very transparent. Be able to oppose any contestation. Today, contestation means also speculation. There's a lot of anti-church, anti-clericalism sometimes. So you see and you hear on media, on things, scandals, assumed scandals, a lot of noise. The church has very big shoulder. And so we are always in a position to defend. We're doing a great job. So one bad news, of course, makes a lot of noise. Thousands of good news, so many are silent. But we have to, anyway, as I said, comply with the international standard. When we have a tender, we'll go again in the case of London. There's some activity done by one of the Excellency Cardinal, who's a suspect in the case, that he paid a transfer money to this, and we're all brother, sister related. Why don't we just apply this simple rule? 3 offers for everything. I need to paint this room. Why do I get my friend to do it? Let's get 3 estimates. We make a tender. We find out which is the best in terms of cost, and we decide. The signature proxy, make sure that the bank's accounts are also in order. People, they change 3 years, 5 years, the legal representative. Did you inform the bank? And the one before has given proxy to a lawyer, then to a friend, to an architect. There's 4 or 5 proxies on that account that, of course, need to be changed. Bank account is another, I think we say something here about the virtual and internet banking. So go online as much as possible because it's easier. It's much easier to keep track of the accounts, to make payment. Cash payments should be abolished. At the UN level, at Italian government level, at any multinational level, cash payments are forbidden today. Actually, not today. FAO, the Food Agriculture Organization, has put this rule 15 years ago. There's no way that organization can pay a cash to any consultant tender, buying paper, only by bank transfer. The checks, it's medieval to pay by checks, with all due respect, with all the nationality, but the checks are danger. They get lost, they get destroyed. You can make a copy of a check. So try to go in a way which today, thanks to this thing, and to this, is making life simply. With rules, whoever has access to my internet, we have cases of sisters that have been totally fraud. It was hacked and they went into their bank account. They were able to get the password and money instead of going from Rome to Argentina, substantial money to Buenos Aires, the province in Argentina. It went to another jurisdiction. We found that. We tried to block. The police came. There's a lot of collaboration at the level of police officers today to try to fight. But the money arrived from this account. The next day, someone went there and withdrew the cash. So be careful also on it, which means my code, my password, whatever is the system, has to be kept in a room, closed. And I, the legal representative, has to have access only. Perhaps my assistant, if I have an assistant. Again, protocol, introduce, care people within your organization that that activity is not for everybody. It's only for me and him, the accountant, the bursar, the treasurer. Because, okay, all this is part of the reality today. So share with the superior, with the your collegial organization, your reporting, what you think, how things are going. Auditors and consultant report, they're not required again by law, but that how can you think or not double check your expenditure and have again another piece of paper that protects you. I will go fast on this part to get to the issue of real estate that are underused and what to do, and talk about briefly about solution. The transparency is a fundamental. The criminal responsibility has been introduced, so also this is important to know. And this is briefly in May 21, the Pope Francis has amended the code, and this is the crime that has been introduced: violation of pontifical secrecy, omission of obligation, crime decree, omission give notice to commission of a crime, abandon. So you see, all this is related to my personal action. In order to cover this risk, don't limit it to be personal. Make it collegial. Speak to others. Involve other of your congregation so you get out from this. This is a solution. We have a lot of historical building, and I cannot stay away from this subject as an Italian, because in many countries, in many areas of Italy, say, why don't we use this? Why don't we open churches to concert? Why don't we rent the roof up here that is overlooking the Colosseum? Why don't we do academic use, historical building? We have this pilgrim tourism today. Rome has 30 million tourists before COVID every year. We have the pilgrim house instead of hotels. So you follow a pilgrim program. You have to go to Mass in the morning, then you go to Assisi the next day, then you go on to the Holy Father on Wednesday, and so on. These are all possibilities. The last one is sponsorship to conservation and maintenance. I strongly believe that this is one of the solutions. Sponsorship. We need to go and knock on doors and ask to sponsor. The link sometimes is that money given is not totally deductible. In America, you're very good in this because you give the possibility. Here, there's a percentage only. We have a basilica here. It's on the other side. The Colosseum is here. Over there, there's Basilica San Clemente. I want to mention this, which is here, I think. Yes. I don't know if we have the link, but I don't want to really go into the name too much. But the Scavi, there's a basilica here on the right. There's 3 levels of church. And under the first church, which is pre-Roman, there's a river. The church has thousands of visitors, which is the main source, good source. The COVID killed all this for 2 years. No, zero. Everything was closed. Then the fine arts, which was, it's all lien. We have a lien with the decree. Close down and say you have to comply with safety, with air, with the hygiene and lights. There's no lights. You go down and it's very small. And this is the bill. Put new lights, millions. And the fathers, they're Irish Dominican. Listen, we have no money to do this. How can we do this? And the fine arts, the Minister of Fine Arts has a list because things are developing. And they use, to go back to Canon 222, where everybody has to contribute. The fine arts give a list of possible sponsorship. So we are negotiating with a major company that makes these lights. They're very famous. I don't know if they do make this, but it's a top company in Italy, very fashion, that they say, well, we will do it. We will do the lighting of this museum site, provided that we get a credit. And we said, yes, of course, we're going to give a credit that this will be covered by you. You can also make a documentary if you want to use it for your commercial activity in order to support. And we're very close to close the deal. So you see how this can be sometime a way out to cover cost. The Vatican Museum is an excellent example, the website. This is not a Catholic church. St. Paul within the church is a Methodist church on Via Napoli. They have concert. The acoustic of the church is known in Rome. Everybody appreciates. They have classic music and sometimes Asian groups from Japan and so on. So they open up and they're a good source of money. They live, St. Paul, which is a Methodist, there's the father with the wife, and they've been doing a great job. They have found a way to cover the running cost of the church. This San Clemente has something like 15 apartments attached to the basilica here. They're all rented. They're rented not because of commercial, with the commercial spirit, also to not put the burden on the priest, but they are rented to friends with a very amicable rent, with very flexible relation, and again, is given the possibility to go ahead. In Venice, since 2003, you pay a ticket, some of the church. Again, the Bishop of Venice said, how can I pay? There's 185 church in Venice, under the bishop, one person. He didn't have money to just open the church, so there's a ticket. This was opposed. It's today a reality. There's no ticketing and so on. And therefore, this is I think we are getting close to the end. I think it's very important to have a planning implemented, to follow what are the protocols in terms of managing, registering, keeping data, auditing our accounts, auditing our property. And it's something that we have to stay in line with international organization. The planning on a base of 3-5 years, the financial also budgeting done properly in a transparent and correct way. Perhaps it would be good to have further meetings in a few years' time to see if also this database has to be centralized. All government, we heard yesterday the comment of Cardinal Pell about having external auditors. The state, Holy See is a state. We should have our office like any other state around the world, the accounting department. We should have that perhaps in order to satisfy the request to be transparent and also to give also satisfaction internally, to press a button and to know what is the situation in this part of the world in terms of ownership and financial. So I really welcome this seminar because I think it's important to have this exchange of information. I hope you find my contribution interesting from what concerns my experience and practical and advice, and look forward to explain any further and give clarification also for the continuation tomorrow of the conference. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Carlo. This is just a little tiny detail, but I mean, and I was really happy that you emphasized Book 6 and the innovation and the new Book 6 that was just promulgated a year ago by Pope Francis that includes financial crimes with under canon law. But just maybe this is a technical consideration that, as I understand, the current criminal trial that's underway in the Holy See is with respect to the civil law within the Vatican state. Is that correct?
Civil law inside the state, it's both. It's difficult to talk about civil because we have our canon law, which has provision for criminal responsibility and civil responsibility. The accusation, yes, is also civil because it's related to management of funds. The accusation is clearly that there's been mismanaged, malpractice, lack of transparency, lack of authorization. You saw the crime. People that they act on their own without getting approval. And there's also fraud. Fraud is a little bit more, it becomes criminal, is when there's a benefit. I make artificially a system where at the end, I, my friend, somebody else has a benefit. So this is the accusation. I think the case is very important for the Pope because it's giving again the right track and the right image of the church today in terms of we don't want to be accused anymore. We don't want to listen to all this anti and not be able to reply. This is highly public. Following this, the church, the Holy Father and the court, they have organized a tribunal. They took a part of the Sistine Chapel on the side and they dedicated for that because before the court in the Vatican was only for the solution of marriages, of employment issue, and sometimes some crimes committed by fathers. Today, this is the first criminal case. They hired two judges, two ladies that they were working in the Italian system, specialized. They took the former prosecutor general of Rome as a head of the court, Pignatore. This is serious. We're doing our homework, and whoever is going to say again, it's not transparent what you do, we don't know. No, we do. Everything is transparent. We're also able to show, no matter what is going to be the outcome of the case, it doesn't really matter, I think, who's going to be guilty, not guilty. But the fact that today we have a system implemented, and this is thanks to a lot of people that I think are based on the program that you are doing that have been inspiring today's also conference. So I think we are in the correct track.
Quick question. Yesterday, I asked Cardinal Pell about the possibility of using underutilized Catholic Church assets for collaborations with other ministry and mission organizations. But I think there's some mystery to what under canon law is acceptable for utilization of this. How would a nonprofit, let's say, that has medical or some sort of services for poor, underserved, how do you demystify what can be utilized in these underserved assets? Who do you go to? What would your advice be to be more successful in that?
Yes. So the question is how, as a non-church organization, non-profit, I can negotiate or find an agreement to use space that are empty. This is happening. It's happening. Sant'Egidio. Sant'Egidio is officially actually part of the church, but there's many other non-profit. The Caritas, for example, is partially state. And others that you just have to. I think the way of doing this is as any other project of building a bridge or developing an area in any part of the world. Feasibility study. Contact the owner. Explain what you want to do. Explain that you're not against the scope and the aims of that specific entity, no matter who's the owner, if it's a congregation, the diocese, the sisters, that you share their scope. In order to help, you want to open a refugee center or homeless center for X number of years, and you're going to get the funds from this. Okay, this is in this country today, the emergency number one is migrants. We are at the entry door in Italy. Italy is the entry door for Europe. This has been, let's not forget what Pope Francis did as his first mission when he was elected. The first thing he did, he went to Lampedusa. Lampedusa is the last island of Italy in front of Africa, and is the first piece of land where all these people every night with the gomoni, with the boats, they come from Tunisia, Libya, Africa, Albania, and so on. Every night they get to Lampedusa and to Sicily. The first thing he did for Pope Francis was to go to Lampedusa. And he said, because we have all this property empty, open up. This created some problems because a lot of religious, they felt, how can we open up like this? We get all these people inside, and then if they don't go away. And this happened, again, when he was elected some years ago. From that moment on, the process that I mentioned has been somehow implemented. So if there's a good idea, and I want to also add, that today, because the church is taking responsibility, is the government that has to be involved. In many parts of this country, but in Europe today, Spain and France, that they have the same problem of migrants coming over with no document, with no really place to stay. They just run away from war or other situation. So they really need to be helped. It's happening, and the state has to provide funds. Because there is a social issue, we do receive funds. The church receives funds to organize the CAR, sono Centro Assistenza per i Rifugiati, that there's so many in Italy. And we are now also very good in getting funds from Brussels, because Brussels is giving, together of the idea of being a union today, Italy, which is an entry, because we have coasts everywhere. It's impossible to check who's coming tonight. All our land is surrounded by sea, and we're not far away from anything, so it's easy to come to Italy. And therefore, I think this sometime, if you can, in your situation, I don't know where we're thinking of this, having this project, go and knock on the door of the municipality, on the region, have some political person involved to see if there's any funds that you can use in order to support your idea and use the property of the church.
Thank you very much, Carlo.